This is Karen Bollier with MIS, and I would like to introduce you to Dan Coller, Product Manager with Precise Business Solutions. Dan will be providing insights on how Epicor Advanced Requisition Management can improve procurement efficiencies so that your business can get the best prices. And with that, here's Dan.
Perfect. Thanks very much. That sounded great. I have my coffee at my side here. I'm ready to go. So for everyone joining the call, let me start here. What we're going to be talking about, of course, is requisitioning. And in the Epicor world, the scenario that we'll be talking about, or the requisitioning scenario, is taking requests from potentially anyone in the business, right? It could be the lowest level of employee right up onto the executive level. We're taking a request for a product or a service. Based on what they're asking for, we're routing that for approval, and then we're communicating that with the supplier. So on the right side of your screen, or on the application for GoToMeeting, there's the chat button. So feel free to either chat. I would just chat the group. Let's keep it public. And what we'll do is we'll look and review those chats at the end of the session, and we'll make it interactive. So at any time throughout the meeting, go ahead and log them there, and we'll address them at the end. I think that would be a great opportunity to keep it interactive at the end of the session. All right, so regarding agenda, we'll start with basically a wide spectrum of conversation. What we'll do is we'll start with very basic conversations, right? Why do we use requisitions? What is a requisition? And what do people do normally today? And why do they use a procurement solution, right? Whether it's ARM, e-procurement, whatever, right? And then once we establish kind of that foundation of a requisition, we'll go into a day in the life of ARM. How do we create requisitions? What does approval routing look like, and communication look like? How do we generate purchase orders, or maybe transfer orders? What about the receiving aspect? What kind of flexibility do we have there? So we'll get into a day of the life, and then we'll actually demonstrate what we go through, the workflow that we discuss in the slide deck. All right, so as far as a bit of housekeeping, as Karen mentioned, of course, yes, I work for Precise Business Solutions. So what's the relationship there between Epicor and Precise? So Precise is an Epicor-only partner down in Australia, and they actually OEM or develop a few modules for Epicor. So starting at the top there, one of the most recent announcements was projects. So there's going to be an advanced projects module, which basically means for anyone who uses the ERP projects module, there's going to be advanced budgeting, there's going to be contractor management, subledger, project subledgers. Basically, it's going to be a stronger contract management and budget forecasting, project budget module for the Epicor projects module. So that is actually going to be GA'd in the next few months here, and that's one of our more recent updates. Pretty exciting for people who use projects. The other concept, number 2 there, is point of sale. So this is actually a module that's been around for 11 years. It applies to Enterprise 7 all the way up to ERP 10, or P21, as well as ERP 10, of course, and Enterprise 7. And it's for people who have a walk-in customer, or they're doing telesales and they need a way to book sales orders or process transactions faster. So it always amazes me how many people who've been longtime Epicor users weren't aware that there was a point of sale or a retail type interface to Epicor ERP. And of course, they're absolutely it. And last but certainly not least, what we're going to be talking about again today is, of course, Epicor ARM. It applies to anyone using Enterprise 7 right on up to ERP 10, the latest versions of ERP 10. So it was actually developed as a replacement, or the go-forward product to e-procurement. So people coming from the E7 days, maybe already using a requisitioning tool called e-procurement. This is really the go-forward updated technical stack to that product. So it's advanced requisition management. From an industry perspective, what we find is that there's about 60% of the user base is service companies. The other 40%, your more standard Epicor manufacturing users of the product. So, health services, financial services, logistics, utilities, media, engineering services make up a large base of the ARM service user group. And then on the other side, what we find is the more typical manufacturers who use the product are organizations who have a few different sites. They might be a public company, and they might have some aspects of engineering. And the reason that services and those type of manufacturers really funnel to a requirement for this module is the way that we receive the demand for requisitions, right? For requests for products or services. So we'll get into that, and that's actually my first slide is, what makes it a good fit for those manufacturers, for the service company. And to sum that up, a lot of times it's who's doing the demanding. Is it a standard purchasing department purchase or transfer, or is it being driven from our user base? Okay, so those are kind of the updates there, and that is ARM. So I see a few people have joined the session, in the last few minutes of me talking. Again, that elevator, pitch of ARM, or the scenario that we're going to be talking about, is taking any employee in our business, documenting their request, and then based on the criteria of their request, getting it approved, and then communicating that purchase order with the vendor. So that is the scenario that we'll look at. So let's dive in. All right. Now, again, with, hopefully I'm getting a few smiles if there's any purchasing people on the call. We'll start with the most basic, understanding of ARM. And I always like to start with this slide because it really is a shift in the way that we think of procurement, especially for non-purchasing people who I'm sure make up the majority of the attendees today. What we find is that from a financial and a reporting perspective, most often we have people who consider or who look at metrics in terms of what are we spending on, right? In this case, we can see what are we spending on tools, on safety, on lighting, on security, on metalworking, right? The shift in, the foundation of ARM is taking that and shifting the way that we think of it. It's more of not what we're purchasing, but how are we purchasing? What is the process of us purchasing, right? And in this concept, what this slide demonstrates really well is that we have planned, what I would say more standard type purchases, probably being driven from our buyers or from the purchasing team. And then we have unplanned type purchases, which means that the demand is probably being driven from our end users, from our maintenance people, from our engineers, from our field service employees, right? And what's great about this slide and what really is different in the way that we think about purchasing is that most people outside of purchasing don't realize what volume of requests come in from our end employees rather than being driven from our purchasing team or from MRP for the manufacturers who are on the call, right? How often are we either creating manual purchase orders, or how often, what percentage of miscellaneous invoices or invoices not related to a purchase order are we managing? And when people think about that way, all of a sudden it's like, okay, there's a larger percentage than we had thought. But what's the takeaway? So who cares? And in my slide, 40% come in, being driven from our employee base. What's the big deal? What does that mean? Well, the concept is that if we think about the process of those employee-driven requests, and we map out that process, right? Most often that process looks like this, right? Most often organizations are using emails, they're using paper, they're using, different ways to communicate that, hey, Maurice needs something. He hands it off to Jen. So we have a lawnmower going by the office right now. I apologize. I'll speak louder. And that paper and those emails get handed off, right? So with that process, it's obviously not hard to see that the requisitions are manual, right? Or they're time consuming, right? Once we hand off a piece of paper, we select our supplier, we select the pricing, we select the part number, we code the GL. At the end of that process, we hand it to the purchasing manager, who then has to double enter all that information, right? It's not hard to start to accumulate the time associated with that process. A lot of times what we hear from the purchasing team is, that our employees aren't using the right vendors. They're not using our strategic pricing. They're not, not getting permission to do this type of purchasing. So it's easy to see that, there opens up a big scope of potential errors with coding, supplier details, pricing, shipping, etc. throughout that process. So it's something that our organizations who usually use ARM have came from that manual or kind of that unformalized process of procurement. All right. And to bring that all back to the 40% of purchases that are done like that, the big takeaway is that if we look at the process cost of that, what I would say the spaghetti slide, right? The process cost of that is, anywhere from $100 up to generate a purchase order, right? The requisition process is the most expensive type or the highest process cost for any type of purchasing that a business does. So if you look at the price of the product, the processing or the opportunity or the disruption cost to your employee base is going to add on another $100 on up, depending on the volume and the complexity of the request that's being done. So that is really the big takeaway, and usually that makes up the majority of the case, which is operational efficiency. How do we do it, right? Are we logging orders directly with the vendors, or are we passing pieces of paper around? And once we have that efficiency, then the other concept is control, right? Operational efficiency is one thing, having control of the process is the other, right? So if we put in place a framework for ordering, little $1 pieces right up onto expensive pieces, if we put in place a process, then we have visibility and control of who's buying what's being purchased, and from where, right? And to the procurement team, that means control. That means reducing costs and waste because you're using preferred pricing, you're negotiating, you're ensuring that there's no unnecessary purchases, right? Or that there's no errors in hey, you ordered the wrong model, you ordered the wrong manufacturer from the wrong manufacturer, etc. Right? And then last but not least, what we'll talk a lot about in this sense is communication. Back to that spaghetti slide, if we're handing email around, if we're passing pieces of paper around, right, the lead time to get something ordered and then receive something is going to be extrapolated based on that process. So if we can improve communication, if we can set up automated approvals, automated reminders, automated PDFs and purchase orders off to the vendors, status updates, then we improve communication, which again all leads back to reduce lead time and reduce disruption and employee disruption in that process. All right. And then of course, then where do people put in place their business case? A lot of times it's about keeping spending within budget. That's around control. It's about operational efficiency. If we're spending 10 minutes for every order, double entering and passing information around and double checking, following up, right? 10 minutes times 10 a day times 5 a week, right? All of a sudden you're freeing up thousands of hours for your team across that process. Very compelling. And again, those two are definitely the foundation of this module. And last but not least, of course, is if you have a process where currently you don't have if you put in place a process, let me say, where currently you don't have a process, then you have the ability to use certain vendors in certain scenarios, take advantage of discounted pricing or month-end pricing with no barriers to entry or exit based on those vendors. So it opens up opportunities for your purchasing team to do what they're paid to do, which is find the best pricing, find the best opportunities for the organization, right? All right, so now we'll flow into what am I going to show you today? Today I'm going to show you the procure-to-pay process within ARM. So let me start with this. So ARM has an RFQ module, which means you're sending out, of course, a request for quote to multiple vendors, and you're managing communication and their response. Then we have a portal for people anyone again in the organization to write what it is that they're requesting. That's going off for approval routing. We're sending emails out to those people. Then we're generating purchase orders after we have approval. Some organizations need to receive, other organizations want to auto-receive. And then last but not least, we have the AP approval module, which allows you to create, approve, and match invoices within ARM. So it allows you to take a miscellaneous invoice or an invoice that triggers an approval routing and send that off. So it's a great module. Now, that, of course, is a lot of content. So what we're going to be talking today is we're going to shave off the RFQ functionality and we're going to shave off the AP functionality and really just focus on the core of the product, which is raising requisitions, getting approval, and generating purchase orders and receipts. All right. So we will look at this flow, requisitioning right through to receiving. All right. Now, there's a few things that I want to talk about before we jump into the demo, because of course, it's not always easy to demonstrate integration or to demonstrate duplicate data entry or the reduction of duplicate data entry or approval routing. Why is it routing the way it's routing? So I'm going to start with, why the system is acting the way it's going to act in the demonstration. So then that way, when we go into it, we're expecting and we're seeing what a day in the life actually looks like without thinking about the background detail going on. So we'll start with the background detail, and then we'll jump into the demo and do the fun stuff. Okay, so the first thing that we do, now imagine this, right? Anyone in your business, again, the maintenance right up to your executive sits down, and they need to tell us what it is that they need, right? So the way they tell us what they need is we have 3 different ways to add items. We have a catalog of items, which means that we have a internally managed list of vendors and of part numbers of which they're going to select common items from that catalog, right? Tell us what you need. The other concept is non-catalog, right? Maybe it's, I have no idea what the part number is. I don't know if we have a preferred vendor because it's a generic product. Here, let me just tell you what I need. So that's non-catalog, or basically non-standard, right? And number 3, if you look at on the right side here where it goes 1, 2, 3, we also have the ability to punch out to a vendor's website, which means if we can't manage an internal catalog because it's Amazon.com and it's an infinite amount of items and parts and pricing, we can just punch out to that website and use their website as a catalog, meaning that we can pull in the parts, the quantities, the pricing, the description into our requisition. So anyone who uses ARM has 3 ways to pull in requisitions, okay? So across these 3 ways, we tell the business what it is that we need. And by the way, of course, you can combine these 3 different ways. So I tell the business what it is that I need, and that's it. I hit submit, all right? Now what will happen is the system will send off emails, approval routing emails to the people who need to approve the requisition, all right? Now what you'll see in my demonstration is I'm going to set up a few different requisitions. Now for people who use standard Epicor already, or maybe even standard manufacturing requisition functionality, this is one of the biggest differences in the core functionality and the advanced requisition functionality, all right? And that's the concept of multi-dimensional approvals. Core Epicor doesn't do this. ARM does do this. Now, there's a lot of little minor differences that add value, but this is probably the single biggest differentiator that adds value. So, for example, let's talk about what is a multi-dimensional approval. Let's talk about it. So in the first case, what this is just a sequential approval routing. So not multi-dimensional, okay? What we're doing is we're looking at the fleet vehicle and we're saying that based on the location that I'm buying it for, Rachel manages that location, so she needs to approve it. However, we can see from that requisition on the left, it costs $125,000, right? It better be a pretty sweet vehicle for $125,000. It exceeds Rachel's authority, but she approves it. She needs to approve it regardless. Then it goes to the purchasing manager, Adam. It exceeds his approval authority, which is set at $10,000, which means it flows right on up to Denham, the CEO. Now, once he approves it, the way that I've configured the system is to generate a purchase order automatically, right? What that means is that Adam doesn't have to double enter it. He doesn't have to go in and release a purchase order. It will hop in automatically. So we're doing the coding, the approval, the budget checking up front and releasing the PO. All right, so that's one way that we're going to approve in the demonstration. Now, the other way that we're going to approve is we're going to bring in multi-dimensional criteria. So in this case, we're going to buy a laptop. That laptop has a cost associated with $7,500. But in the catalog that we manage, which is non-Epicor inventory, that part class is set up as an IT item. So the way we'll configure the approval routing is to say that if anyone buys any part class of IT, Roy needs to approve it because he manages IT, right? We want to make sure it's the right laptop. You have the right reason for buying that. You know, we're not going to buy you a new laptop because the battery died, right? So, and engineering companies love to bring in, information or multi-dimensional approval based on situations like this as well, right? So he's going to approve by the part class, but based on the location, still Rachel's location, hits her budget, she needs to approve it. It exceeds her threshold, in that case, it's going to go to Adam. He approves it, and again, no double data entry. The purchase order is automatically created in Epicor ERP, and in the case of my demonstration, it will be sent automatically to the vendor. Okay. Now the last one, again, is equipment. So we're buying equipment. What you'll see here is Jen down at the bottom manages the natural account code of 1200, which this equipment was coded against, which means she now needs to approve it. But based on the location and based on the value, Rachel also needs to approve it, and that purchase order is generated. So the big takeaway here is the dimensions or the criteria we can use for approval routing can be based on the value of the request. It can be based on the location of the request or warehouse in Epicor. You can define it or use Epicor warehouses, the part class or category, or the GL account code, and any combination of those, right? So we can use location, category, and GL category, any combination to determine the criteria so that we have automated approval routing. All right, so they all got an email. They also have a user interface that we'll look at in the demonstration of how they interact with that requisition and approve it, but for simplicity's sake, they approve it. All right, now one of the biggest factors here is that we also support a parent-child relationship, which means from an efficiency standpoint, anyone in your business can request anything they need, any vendor, any location, any multi-company set up in Epicor. They put it on one requisition, and ARM will split that out automatically. Right? Another minor differentiator between standard Epicor and the advanced requisition module, right, is supporting multi-location, multi-company, multi-vendor situations like that. So if you, in this case, you'll see in that top left graphic, we'll order from multiple vendors and we will have the system create multiple purchase orders automatically for us. Now, for the non-purchasing people on the phone call, the reason that's a huge differentiator is today, what your buyers do is they get the requisition. Let's say they get handed a piece of paper that's fully approved. They sit in front of Epicor and they create a purchase order for vendor A. And then they enter in the line item information for vendor A. And then they attach the PDF to an email and send it to the vendor. And then you know what they do? They start with vendor B, and then they do a purchase order for vendor B, and then they do vendor C, right? So the reason that's a huge deal to the purchasing team is that the system automates that process. Very, very compelling. Now, another minor functional tool, which is very useful, is consolidation. So for certain vendors, we can say that, you know what, vendor C is not a priority. It's just a stationary supplier. We'll consolidate or pool all the requests from any employee in our business, and then the purchasing team can release that whenever they want, right? So why is that a big deal? Because what we're doing is we're taking, in this case, we're taking 3 requests from 3 different employees that would have went out and become 3 different purchase orders, 3 different shipments, and 3 different invoices to process for your AP team. So it gives you an opportunity to significantly reduce the volume of invoices you're getting from vendors that you order from 5 times a day. And as an FYI, a lot of purchasing teams are already acute to this. However, again, instead of them managing it manually, the system pools it up for you by vendor automatically. So it's a very cool tool, and we'll look at that in the demonstration as well, because again, it reduces shipping charges and it reduces the amount of invoices that you're processing on the back end. All right. Purchase orders, transfer orders, and receiving. All right. So one thing I didn't mention, I should have, starting from the beginning, a lot of our service users of ARM actually requisition transfer orders. So they're not actually purchasing anything. What they're doing is their department staff are actually just consuming consuming products from the central warehouse, right? Hey, we're going out to the job. We're going to load the van up with these 5 items. What they do is they requisition a transfer order rather than a purchase order, just as an FYI. But the majority of people who use ARM, of course, are requisitioning purchase orders. So something worth pointing out. And then receiving. So let's talk about it. So what I've set up in the demonstration, what we'll talk about for purchase orders today, is that ARM will automatically create the purchase order in Epicor, which means a purchase order generated in ARM is a purchase order in Epicor. So that's huge, right? Again, because today, most companies are handing a piece of paper or handing an email off to purchasing, who then sit and create that PO. So that will happen as an automation. The other thing, again, is transmitting purchase orders. We'll do that directly. And then here's a big takeaway, something interesting to think about. Actually, most service providers that use ARM are the main users of this, but for manufacturers who have field service teams, something to consider, right? Non-ERP users have the authority to receive their own purchase orders, right? Why is that a big deal? Well, if you receive a service, maybe someone painted a wall, right? Rather than sending it off to the warehouse team to receive that, we can have the administrator, or we can have the IT person receive their own purchase orders, or our field service people who are actually doing the requesting, but also receiving the product at their customer site can now receive their own purchase orders. So where they're given authority, what that does is it frees up kind of a static or a linear process in standard Epicor and gives them the flexibility to operate as a true, service type scenario, right? Where people do receive their own purchase orders. I'm sure there's a few people who are rolling their eyes right now. It's all permission based. So of course you don't need to give that permission to everyone or anyone if you choose. So I hope we're good. All right, so that's it. So that's the demo flow I'm going to go through. We're going to purchase from different vendors, different products, different scenarios, and then we'll build on what we learned. Again, any questions throughout the process, just put them into the chat. And before I shut down the software, we will go and answer any questions. All right, so what I've just done, I'll go slower. What I've done is, you'll see I'm just running Google Chrome. So that's one of the biggest takeaways here, is that ARM is a browser-based solution, right? Which means that anyone from home or anyone with an internet connection can log in with their Epicor credentials. Or again, they don't have to be an Epicor ERP user, but they can just log in with their credentials and access the procurement process from anywhere with an internet connection. So let's go ahead and start with a busy screen first. I'll do this on purpose. It's an ugly screen, but it's worth starting here. Now, what we're looking at, the reason I like to start here is just show all the things going on. So this is really the keys of the castle. This would be either your procurement director or your IT manager. In this case, we call them the ARM administrator. This is where you do all the configuration and the permissions and roles around who uses the system. My point being is that this is an HTML5 true website with reactive design, right? So if I'm using a mobile phone, oh, I screwed up. If I'm using a mobile phone, you'll see that the screen automatically resizes itself based on the real estate that you have available. So if you're using a phone, you still have 100% functionality. If you're using a tablet, expand this out, you see it reacts based on the real estate that you have. So again, approval and procurement and requisitioning doesn't have to stop just because you're out of the office. So that's a big point to start with. The other thing I wanted to show the group here before we jumped into the demonstration is the users. So what's really common is that, for that, if you remember that slide at the beginning, I said 40% of purchasing is unplanned, typically for most organizations, right? Meaning that the demand is coming from the employee. What a lot of organizations do from an efficiency standpoint is they give their employees a P card, or they say, you know what, you can order from staples.com, or you can order from this company account automatically. And the reason they do that is for efficiency, right? Wow, we don't want to have to create a purchase order. We don't want to have to create a requisition for everything we do. So in the first example that I'm going to show you how organizations go from that model, which basically generates a lot of miscellaneous invoices and a lot of downstream work for the AP team. I'm going to show you how they go from that model to using ARM, right? It takes away that excuse of, we don't do it because it's not efficient to create purchase orders. So we'll start with that example, and then from there, we'll build a more complex example around approvals and a standard requisition process. So anyways, back to my point, the purchasing person that we'll use today is Maurice. He's going to be a very average, low-level user. He's not a purchasing professional by any means. And we can see that his requisition limit is $10, right? Which means if he requisitions anything for $10 and under from a listed vendor, we trust him that he's making the right decision. Basically meaning we don't want to engage our employees or engage anyone else to have to do approval for such a minor request. All right, so let's log in as Maurice, and we will pretend we need some items. All right, now you'll see that I've logged into Maurice. His screen is a lot more simple, right? So you can see that, of course, based on the rules, based on the permissions that you're giving, your screen updates and becomes a lot more simple. So what Maurice can do is he can create new requisitions, and he can look at all the requisitions that he submitted, and that's it, right? Very simple. So before we create a new requisition, what's a huge benefit to very low-level users, non-purchasing professionals like Maurice, is that he has access to status updates, right? So right here, we can see that everything that he's ordered based on the most recent orders, he can come in here and say, you know what, it's been ordered, or my order's been received. Let's try to find some other ones that, there we go. This one is still, it's approved, but it hasn't been ordered yet. Let's try to find some other ones. Approval in process, meaning I've got one person's approval, I'm waiting for other people's approval. So the big takeaway here is rather than picking up the phone and saying, hey, this is important to me, where's this at? Has it been ordered? Has it been approved? What's the holdup? Me as any user can see where in the process, what the status of that order is. So it's a very powerful tool to free up. Again, it's usually the purchasing people who are fielding the angry calls from the employees. So it's a nice tool there. All right, so I can see my past orders. So let's go ahead and do an order. So one way, there's multiple ways, like I mentioned. One way that we can create a requisition, the simplest way, is by simply just creating a brand new requisition. So we'll call this the MIS example. We also support requisition types, meaning that based on the type of request they're doing, you can define the required fields. If I'm doing a CapEx purchase, I have a required field telling me what the CapEx number is going to be, right? Or what department it's going to be. If I'm doing standard, then it's going to be a different required set of information. All right. So that's where organizations use that typically. You'll see here my location code, shipping code, delivery information is all defaulted. So let's go ahead and add some information. Now here's the catalog of the concept, excuse me, of a catalog and a non-catalog. If you remember from my slide deck, catalog is a list of self-managed vendors and parts, and non-catalog is completely free form. Just I'm going to tell you what I need. So let's start off with a catalog. And again, what we're going to do is just an efficient process. Go back to the main page. Now, what's nice about this is, again, Maurice is not a purchasing professional, right? So what we're doing is we're giving him an e-commerce-like website to shop from in our catalog. So he can search by description like Google. He can search by category like Amazon and scroll through the catalog, or like a proper ERP system. If he is an ERP user, he can do a very robust search based on vendors and category groups and categories and vendor part classes and et cetera, et cetera. So it gives him 3 different ways to add items. But in this case, Maurice knows what he's looking for. It's a common request. So we'll go ahead and purchase those items. We'll go ahead and add that. And I actually want to go to the second page. Let's wait for the screen to leave. There we go, second page. And I want to actually add a few different vendors just to prove my point. All right, there, we'll add that and we'll finish. All right. Now what we've done as Maurice is a very low-level user, right? What we did is just by selecting the parts that we needed, we've selected the right vendor at the right quantity, which I can change on this screen, and in some cases at the right price, the preferred pricing that comes from Epicor ERP or from the catalog, either way. These ones, maybe it's a more volatile price. It changes every week, so we update it when we're doing the request. And I've also coded the GL, right? At Precise, we kind of have a joke around the office, which is a lot of users of ARM don't even know how to spell GL, right? The GL code is not important to them. They don't care. What we're doing here is we mask the employee. We mask the default location that they're assigned to. We mask the department that they're assigned to. We mask the vendor that they're ordering from, maybe even the part that they're ordering from. And all that logic defaults to GL. So you'll see this as we go through the different examples. The GL code in most cases will be defaulted. Because it defaults the GL code, we also have a budget, right? And that budget means that it's looking at the GL code budget right here. This is the account code. It's saying that we have $11,000 budgeted, and because I demonstrate way too often, we've blown it significantly. All right, so let's look at a different example. This one's green. What this one is saying, this GL code is saying, we've budgeted $12,000. So far this month to date is the way I have this set up. You could also do year to date or year cumulatively. We have $416. Oh, I need to hit save. There you go. Now it will update. And what it's saying is this requisition, if we approve it, will consume $3, leaving us with the remaining $11,583. So the requisitioner and the approvers all have this information to make decisions. Right? Do we want to approve it? What if we approve it? That what if financial question, we can see what that effect will have on the budget. Right? So it's a very, very important tool for finance teams, purchasing teams, and approval teams. All right, I'm going slow just to explain a few things, but again, the point is that I added a few very simple items. I've looked at, the budget. In this case, I'm a low-level user. I don't care that it's over budget. I'm going to go ahead and submit this. Total is $6, and that's ordered. All right. So what we've done here is, again, we've created 3 different purchase orders: one for Acme vendor, one for the vendor of Ethan, and one for the vendor of Gecko. Oh, there it is, Gecko, all simultaneously. So back to my main point. The main point was that a lot of organizations use P cards, or they allow their organizations to go off and place orders directly with the suppliers. The reason this is more efficient is that we've just created 3 different orders to 3 different vendors in one go, right? Rather than picking up the phone and calling 3 vendors, rather than going on the websites of 3 different vendors, we've done that automatically. And the criteria we used was, we said, look, if they're using our catalog vendors, which means it's our preferred pricing, which means that it's below a certain dollar threshold, we just allow them to create those POs automatically, right? We don't need interference. So that's one example. But now let's go ahead and go back and do a more formal approval process where we actually do need approval, okay? So one of the cool efficiency tools, I mentioned we can see all requisitions here. One of the great tools is, oh, I wonder why MIS didn't save. One of the great tools we can do is we can just simply say, you know what, I need to order something this week. I know I ordered that same thing last week, and I can come in here and just quickly copy that. And that brings in all the same lines, right, very quickly. So it gives me a very fast reorder point. Now, in this case, what I did is I brought in a different requisition, and you can see that the total is $28. Right? I still have my real-time budget checking, have that information, and I'm going to go ahead and submit this. Now, what this will do, actually, let's add in IT items so we trigger the multi-dimensional approval process. Of course, I can delete items that I don't want this week. Maybe I just wanted to use it as a foundation. I don't need actually every item. I can adjust pricing. I can adjust quantity. Maybe I need 2. But let's go ahead and add non-catalog, which is, okay, requisition type standard. Let's go ahead and add non-catalog, which again is non-standard. It's going to be a miscellaneous request. You can see here. So I'll say, you know what, let's go ahead and add something IT. So we'll do a monitor, description, monitor for my desk. The vendor, I might want to leave blank. I don't know the vendor. I'm Maurice. I don't care, right? I can leave it blank. I can leave the cost blank. In this case, it's a required field, but if it's not configured that way, you can leave it blank, right? So that gives you more flexibility than standard Epicor. Standard Epicor, for people who don't know, who use it for manufacturing, you need to enter in vendor, cost, and GL account code before it's ever submitted, right? And the big difference with ARM is you can make it as loose as you want or as tight as you want around being able to submit it to the next approver. So that's a huge flexible point to ARM, which most people take advantage of. In this case, let's go ahead and just do the IT experts. There we go. It doesn't get much more IT than that. And then we'll do the unit cost. We'll say it's $200. All right. Okay. Now, what's really interesting about this, you'll see that my geo account code is blank, right? See that right here? Now, like I mentioned, what it's going to do is it's going to look at the vendor. It's going to look at me as an employee. It's going to look at the location that I'm assigned to within the business, and it's going to look at the category of the item that I'm buying, and it's going to default that geo code, even though it's a miscellaneous part, miscellaneous description, etc. So let's go ahead and save this. We'll save and close that. And here we go. So here's my miscellaneous monitor. And what it's done is it's coded the GL. It said, you know what, this is a fixed asset. It's an office computer, and it's for this location, CHI, right? Which means I still have a budget. And again, you can see that I've extremely blown my budget here. I imagine that the finance people on the call are a little bit worried right now. It's only a demo system, so we'll call it good. But for the budget, $20,000 has been allocated. You can see I've used this much. This requisition is going to be $200, which means I will be over budget by $301, $308.84 if I approve this. But because we're in a demonstration, we are cowboys and we're going to do it anyways. All right, so let's go ahead and submit this. There we go. Now what we've done, make this more simple, is we can also see the approvers. We've triggered the approval tree. All right, so in this case, we can see Jen is the next approver. If you remember from my slide deck, Jen is based on the location that I'm buying for, and she can approve up to a certain dollar threshold of $2,000. And of course, this is $217, so no problem, she'll be our approver. But for the IT category, it's gonna trigger the multi-dimensional approval tree. So we can see that Jen is our approver, and in the system, she's up to 1,000, but Roy needs to approve the IT category. So we have a visual tracker of what's going on here. All right. So let's go ahead and log into Jen and get this thing approved. Now, Jen and Roy would have received an email saying, you know what, you have something new to approve, or maybe it consolidates. We can consolidate also. You have 5 new things today that you need to approve. So let's log in to Jen. Now you can see Jen's dashboard, very similar to Maurice. It's a lot more simple, but she has some more flexibility up here. She has requisitions that are requiring her approval, okay? She clicks on this, and then here we go. Here's our requisition that we've just created from Maurice. She can approve it from the header level, but for most people, they want that line level detail. Now, what's important to mention is that if Jen would have got that email and clicked on the link in her email, that email brings her right to here, right? One click of a button. If she's on her work computer, it automatically logs her in with that click of a button. And she has line level detail, she has budget information, she has geocoding, and of course, she can edit each line because she's given that permission. She can change vendors, quantities, pricing as she sees fit because she's given that permission. And she can also see that for this one, Roy and herself are required. All right. Like I mentioned, a lot of people use this system just to reduce unnecessary purchasing. This is an awesome example of unnecessary purchasing, right? Acme Supply, this powertrain component part, we have 10,362 in stock, and we have another 502 on order, right? In this case, we probably don't need to purchase anymore. We probably want to just consume from our central warehouse or consume from inventory, right? So this is a perfect example of where either Jen's going to deny it or she's going to change the line type from purchase to a transfer, all right? And in this case, for the sake of the demonstration, let's deny it. She denies it, and there you go. Now we have a red line. Maurice gets that notification. He has that visibility to see that line's been denied. Jen can also see, wow, we need a new monitor. Why is that? She can hover over that note. She said, sorry, it fell from my desk. Oh, okay, that's unfortunate. She's happy with the rest of this, so she's just going to simply approve it. All right. Now let's look at the simple workflow, right? So this is where you can see where the bottlenecks are in the process. The requisition has went to Jen. Jen, from a location and a budgetary process, has approved it, and it's a green check mark. However, Maurice, who really needs this information, really needs the products, he can see that Roy, they're waiting on Roy. Roy's the bottleneck. All right. So it's a very good status reminder as well. Let's go ahead and log in to Roy. Now, Roy would have at the same time got an email. He could have approved this first, by the way. There's no sequential parameters for multi-dimensions for people who want a requisition like that. So he could have approved this ahead of time, but in this case, he is in second place. So we log into Roy, same thing, right? He has requisitions pending his review, and he has requisitions pending his approval. So I'll quickly explain the difference. ARM has the ability to ad hoc send things for review. So if someone requisitions something that doesn't, in the approval tree, doesn't trigger, someone that we want to be included, any user can send a requisition for someone else's review. So basically what someone has done is said, you know what, Roy, I want you to look at this even though you're not part of the approval tree, right? Again, very flexible system, a really cool tool. But in this case, we're looking for things that he needs to approve because that's the automated part of ARM. So he clicks on this. Again, he would have got an email, and he has two things, both from Maurice. He can, again, reject from this level. So let's go ahead and do that. Rejected. No. And then he can also reject from the line level details. Again, if in that email, he would have clicked this button, and it comes right to here. He can see that it's been denied by Jen, right? Oh, why was it denied? We have a lot in stock. Yeah, we do. Good call, Jen. He can see that we're over budget for IT. He can see that Jen's approved it, and we're waiting on Roy. Again, we're logged in as Roy right now. You can see the notes by clicking on them. What I didn't mention is we can also have attachments at the header level, which do flow into ERP10. And we also have preformed notes, both internal and external notes, right? Internal notes mean, of course, ARM users and Epicor users can see it. External means it might print on a purchase order or a delivery note or a receipt note based on whatever we want. So something worth pointing out. Okay, so Roy's happy with this, even though they're over budget. It fell off his desk. It appears that Maurice really needs it, so we're going to approve that, right? And now what we've done, so we have, look at this, fully approved. Maurice gets an update. His status is now ordered. And again, what we've done is that we've created a purchase order in ERP for, Ethan and Gecko, as well as created a fully approved requisition, but we haven't created a purchase order yet. Again, this is the concept of the PFO. Why did we do this for vendor code IT experts? We want to consolidate purchase orders. If we're ordering from them 10 times a week, we might want to just send that one purchase order a week. So we've pooled this fully approved request into the pro forma order stage, at which time anyone can release it to the vendor. All right. All right. And last but not least, we have our products ordered. Let's go ahead and do some receiving. So we'll go back to the dashboard. We're logged in as Roy, so we'll need to log in as someone else. Let's go to Rachel. Her dashboard, her user interface is a little more complex, right? She actually has pro forma orders ready to be created into a purchase order, and she also has purchase orders ready to be received. All right, so let's go ahead and receive the items that we ordered. So as you see, this is from Maurice. This is everything that we've all ordered today. From a header level, I can receive it, or from an actual order number, I can go in there and do my partial receipts where applicable. So in this case, I've done a quantity of 2. It auto defaults because I've ordered 2, but I can, of course, receive less than the quantity of 2. And there we go. And we have tolerance checking as well, which says, if it's out of tolerance, it will warn them. We can even stop it. We can flag and automatically create emails and reminders to people if things fall out of tolerance. But in that case, it's a bad example. So this was actually demonstrated for someone who had a very high requirement around receiving. So let's go ahead and just make it easy, and we'll receive both of them. Oh, it did let us receive it. So we received one of two. So now we come in here and we can just simply receive a lot. There we go. And then we've created these documents as well. Okay, and now it's closed. So this, we've just done the receiving. This is the exact same as receiving in Epicor. It's good to point out you can do it either in Epicor or in ARM. It does not matter at all. It's bi-directional flow of information. So you can create purchase orders in Epicor and see them in ARM, or you can create POs and receipts in ARM, and of course see both of those in Epicor ERP. Either way is the same. So worth pointing out. Again, like what I like to show is, man, you know, it's a lot easier in ARM, less clicky than in Epicor in most cases. So again, you can do it in either way. If your warehouse guy loves Epicor ERP receiving, there's no problem. He can continue to do his job in Epicor ERP. It does not matter at all. Okay, so that was the flow, procure all the way to receiving. But now let's go ahead and do things a little bit quicker. So one thing you saw me do, and we got to log into someone else. Let's go back to Maurice. There we go. All right. So one thing we can do is we can look at all of our requisitions, and we can, like I mentioned, we can just simply copy. So copy means bring it up. We just want to copy and reorder that. And of course you can edit it. The other thing that we can do is we can have preformed templates, right? So in this case, let's say we have a big regular order. That's very unique, right? A big regular order. So what I can do is I can just click on that, and it will bring in the quantities, the pricing. You know, it can even be miscellaneous items that aren't even in our catalog. We can do non-catalog miscellaneous templated orders. How about that, right? Very powerful. And what's important about this is we still have full transparency over budget. The GL accounts are defaulted, you know, in the template. They're dynamic as well. So if I use a template as an engineering employee, and then my partner, or my colleague, I should say, also uses the same template, the GL account code will be different because he's a sales guy and I'm an engineer, right? Or he's located at one office, I'm at a different office. So you can use the same template, but the GL account code, again, is dynamic. So it's very, very important, very cool. And of course, I can edit it. So I can delete lines and I can add lines, all right? So as I mentioned, this is the last thing I'll leave you with, is we have catalog, non-catalog, and if you remember, the third way we can request something is punch out. So we can punch out to any e-commerce site that you have configured here in the punch out. So in this case, we have Office Max. Oh, it's gonna make me do a type again. There we go. All right, so let's go to Office Max. So the concept here for everyone, I see more people are joining as we go along. The concept is, if we don't want to manage internally a vendor's catalog, we can use their website, their e-commerce website, as a catalog, or as a way to bring in product information, pricing, description, part numbers, etc. So what we've done is we said Office Max is one of our preferred vendors. We've launched our business account with this vendor, and let's go ahead and just say we need some different, something exciting like pens, right? So we go in, we're searching their website, and we say, you know what? There's quantity of one. Let's do the quantity different. Let's add in 3 different items. There we go. And let's go ahead and review. And we're going to check out. Bear with me. Okay. So now you see here, we're logging out. We've just checked out OCI submit. Let's see what just happened. So what we've just done, remember we started with a template. That's why there's other vendors on here. What we've just done is we brought in, quote unquote, non-catalog items. We brought in the description. We brought in the part number. We brought in the quantities from the website. We brought in the website's pricing, and we've coded the GL. How did we code the GL? because the vendor is masked. We know the vendor, of course, because it's a punch-out vendor, so we mask that vendor. The dynamic location that I'm buying for, default. The department that I work for, in this case, is corporate purchasing, default, right? Which means I also have budget authority, okay? And that's it. And then I just submit that requisition. So we use external websites as an external catalog to bring in that information. Very cool, very modern tool. And I lied. Last thing I wanted to show is for organizations who do use projects or jobs within Epicor ERP, any job information or parts for the job or project information can also be brought in. So in this case, I'm bringing the project CP1000. If I had a phase and a budget against that, I could bring that in. And let's look at what happens. Come on. Oh, it might not, it's playing difficult. All right, what I wanted to show is that we can look at the project budget and the phase budget the same way that we looked at the GL budget over here, if you remember me showing that. So for purchasing or requisitioning to a job or purchasing or requisitioning to a project, we can do that within ARM, either at the header level or at the line level, right? So we could add job material or purchase for a project. Very important. So again, that opens up a whole nother can of functionality. So if that's a requirement for yourself, if you're doing a lot of miscellaneous purchasing for jobs or projects, contact the folks at MIS and we'll set up a demonstration specifically for that business requirement. All right, with that, we have a few minutes left, so I'm going to open up the questions if there are any. And
hi, this is Sam. I don't have any other questions in the chat room right now. If anybody wants to pop one in, we'll give you a couple minutes. Otherwise, what Dan and I will do is send you all an email with contact information, and that way you can follow up directly to Dan and MIS personally to do any additional follow-up presentations, as well as get any more attachments or any information that might be helpful to your decision-making process.